So to some extent, Russia and Western Europe are being lumped together. And what I want to look at is, can we really consider Western Europe and Russia as one big market for telematics? I think that the simple answer straight away is we can say that there are significant differences in partly the readiness of the infrastructure to support telematics in Russia. We can say that in Europe is pretty ready for telematics. The infrastructure is there, the technology is there. Whereas in Russia, there's quite a low level of readiness. The PSAPs are not really ready for e-call. There isn't really very good coverage of roadside assistance. But on the other hand, there's quite a high willingness for some Russian car owners to pay for telematics, especially for the people who are buying the premium vehicles, who are concerned about their vehicle being stolen and not recovered. So we see in Europe, there's maybe a low willingness to pay, but a high readiness for telematics, and almost the opposite situation in Russia. And really, the market driver for telematics in Russia has historically been stolen vehicle tracking. There's a large number of local stolen vehicle tracking services and systems available in Russia, and they tend to be offered at a very, very high price, very high compared to what's available in Western Europe. And one of the reasons for this is the police do not always give the best possible support for recovering and for tracking stolen vehicles in Russia. So quite often, the people who provide the tracking service have to provide a kind of private recovery service. And we can see that most vehicle manufacturers currently offer aftermarket stolen vehicle tracking. A couple of manufacturers, BMW and Porsche, have developed, I've called it a semi-OE system. So it means that maybe the vehicle is pre-wired with the harness for stolen vehicle tracking, but the dealer fits the DCM or the telematics control unit to the vehicle when the customer orders that option. And the only vehicle manufacturer so far that is offering OE telematics in Russia is Volvo. And the service provider they're using is Autolocator. But the question is, if there seems to be some kind of demand for telematics, why haven't more car manufacturers launched an OE system in Russia? Russia has historically been one of the, well, certainly over the last few years, a rapid growth and a big market potential for vehicle manufacturers. But this is also one of its weak points, that as a market that's grown very quickly over recent years, it's also been very susceptible to the recession and the financial situation. And we've seen that the Russian vehicle market has dropped by as much as 50% over the last 12 months. And this uncertainty over the size of the market and the sales that manufacturers are going to have in the future has put some doubt in their mind about whether they should really rush and develop telematics for Russia, or whether they should wait till the market stabilizes. Russia's also maybe a little bit hard to predict in terms of what the government will do in terms of import taxes, and they're also pushing very strongly for their domestic global positioning system, GLONASS. There has been some discussion from the supporters within the Russian government that maybe they will have an import tax for in-car systems that use GPS that don't use GLONASS. So this is not confirmed, but it's another doubt or another concern that the vehicle manufacturers have about trying to do telematics business in Russia, is what could the Russian government do that could impact on their costs or their strategy. And also, to some extent, Russia is a little bit underdeveloped in terms of how vehicles are sold. And there's a lot of work that dealers can do to improve the way that they interact with the customer, that they market their vehicles. And whilst in the more developed markets, telematics is a very useful tool for customer relationship management and keeping in contact with the customer, there's probably 2 or 3 things that the dealers can do just following best practice from the current situation in Western Europe without telematics before they really need to do telematics to move forward with customer relationships. So these are the strategic challenges that car manufacturers face in Russia. But when it comes to trying to implement telematics, we find that this is where the infrastructure is not really ready for telematics in Russia in the way that maybe in Western Europe and other markets around the world are more ready. So I'm going to look at a couple of the potentially leading telematics services to understand where the gaps are in the infrastructure in Russia compared to Western Europe. And the first one is eCall. And maybe a little bit similar to how I explained previously for China, the PSAPs in Russia are not so well organized. Currently there is no single telephone number that Russian citizens can dial to access the PSAPs and to get emergency services. It varies by region and even by telephone network. If you have a mobile phone from one operator, you ring one number. If you have a different network operator, maybe you have a different number to get emergency support. Also, across such a big country, the PSAPs are organized by different departments within the local government. So in Russia, there's a central PSAP infrastructure. Sorry, in Moscow, there's a central PSAP infrastructure, but this is quite unique in Russia. In other regions, it could be the local police or the ambulance service or the internal affairs department in other regions. So it's quite a diverse deployment of PSAPs, and it's very hard for telematics service providers to work out who should they be contacting if there's an eCall situation. So until recently, most cars in Russia were sold without roadside assistance. But over the last 12 to 18 months, some of the bigger European roadside assistance companies are starting to develop services in Russia. But one of the characteristics is that they're typically focused on the big cities. So they will give you breakdown services within the cities and maybe with a radius of 20 to 50 kilometers around the cities. This will be included with your vehicle. But if you drive outside of this area, then this is not included. And if you break down and you ask for the service, then you must pay quite a high fee to be recovered by the breakdown companies. So this is quite different to Western Europe, where typically the whole country is covered by roadside assistance. And it's something that's going to have to be managed from customer expectation. What can they expect from roadside assistance and also breakdown call if that's offered as a telematic service? Is it completely included, or will they have to pay depending on where they are when they press the button? There's a big opportunity for stolen vehicle tracking systems in Russia. One of the potential obstacles, however, is that many of the insurance companies, they require customers to fit a tracking system, but they have some private internal criteria to judge whether the system is approved or not. So there is no public criteria for SVT in Russia, like there is in the UK from Thatcham. So it means that the SVT companies, they have to negotiate with individual insurance companies to get their system onto the approved list. The danger is that the criteria could change very quickly. So if there's a new attack method becomes known in the Russian market, then the insurance companies could change their criteria overnight, and it would mean that systems may no longer be approved. And this uncertainty is very, very difficult for an OE telematics system that could take years to change or to add a countermeasure. In the China presentation, I mentioned that some of the Western European network operators are developing special features to support telematics, such as the special tariffs with free testing. There's a move towards SIM chips that are soldered onto the PCB now instead of the SIM cards that are inserted into a slot. A number of network operators are developing service level agreements where they will guarantee a certain performance of their network. So these are all things that the Western European network operators are developing. And the question is, if we have a SIM card from a Russian operator, can they provide the same level of support? And from our research so far, the main Russian operators are not providing this kind of functionality, maybe a little bit similar to the situation in China. So the car manufacturers are going to have to decide, should they use a Western European operator roaming into Russia, or is it better to work with a local network operator who knows the market conditions and the market situation a little bit better? And I think that sums up the whole question for how to do business in Russia, is we need to have some of the Western European know-how, but we need to know how to do business in Russia, how to deal with the bureaucracy, how to deal with local government. So maybe a little bit similar to what we said for China, is doing telematics business in Russia will certainly need local partners who know how to do business there, but who can use and who can benefit from the know-how from the experience in Western Europe coming into Russia.